The Thanksgiving dinner table at my parents' house buzzed with family chatter when Dad decided to make his annual announcement about maximizing family assets. 23 relatives gathered around the extended dining room table, passing turkey and discussing everyone's latest achievements while I sat quietly at the end, still treated as the family's biggest disappointment. At 29, I was the sister who'd wasted her engineering degree on what everyone assumed was some failed tech startup, while my golden child brother Marcus, 32, had built what appeared to be a successful career as a commercial real estate broker. His BMW in the driveway and designer suits made the right impression at family gatherings. "Before we dig into dessert," Dad announced, tapping his wine glass for attention, "I want to discuss some important family business." The conversation quieted as relatives turned their attention to Dad's serious tone. He had the same authoritative manner he'd used when making major family decisions throughout our childhood. "Marcus has been looking at investment properties to expand his real estate portfolio," Dad continued, "and I think it's time we made better use of underutilized family assets." My stomach tightened. I had a terrible feeling about where this was heading. "The little house Sarah lives in has tremendous potential," Dad explained, pulling out a folder of documents. "With proper renovation and Marcus's professional management, it could become a significant income-generating property." Marcus beamed beside him, clearly aware of the plan. His wife Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, having spent years watching other family members achieve traditional success while I remained the family oddball. "As the successful child, he deserves the property," Dad declared with paternal pride. "Marcus understands real estate values and has the business acumen to maximize the investment potential." Aunt Patricia clapped her hands together. "What a wonderful way to help Marcus build his portfolio." Uncle Robert raised his beer approvingly. "Smart thinking, Tom. No point letting property sit stagnant when it could be generating returns." Dad opened his folder with obvious satisfaction. "I've already had the property appraised. The current structure is worth about $180,000, but with proper renovation, Marcus estimates it could reach $280,000 in today's market." I stared at the paperwork in growing disbelief. Somehow, my parents had obtained an appraisal for a property they'd never owned. "The timing is perfect," Marcus added confidently. "The neighborhood is gentrifying rapidly. With my connections in commercial real estate, I can oversee renovations that will maximize appreciation." "Marcus has already arranged for contractors to start next week," Dad continued. "Kitchen renovation, bathroom updates, maybe knock out some walls to create a more modern floor plan." My blood ran cold. "Brother started renovating my kitchen," I said quietly. "You can't renovate that property," I said, my voice remaining steady despite the rage building inside me. Dad barely glanced in my direction. "Sarah, I know change is difficult, but Marcus needs this opportunity. The house is wasted on someone who can't appreciate its investment potential." "I appreciate it perfectly," I replied calmly. "It's my house." The dinner conversation slowed as family members began paying attention to our exchange. "Sarah," Marcus said with brotherly condescension, "you rent that place from Mom and Dad. It's been family property for years." "Actually," I said, standing from the table, "it's been my property for 3 years. I purchased it in 2021. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's confident smile faltered as he processed my words. "That's impossible," he stammered. "We would have known if you bought property." "You would have known if you'd asked," I replied, pulling out my phone. "But you've spent 3 years assuming I was barely surviving on some failed startup income." I showed them the screen displaying my property monitoring app. 1247 Maple Street, purchased by Morrison Tech Holdings, December 2021. Fully paid off, no mortgage. Dad grabbed my phone to examine the property information more closely. "Morrison Tech Holdings? What is that?" "Pie company," I replied simply. "The failed startup you've been dismissing for 5 years." Marcus snatched the phone from Dad's hands, scrolling through what was clearly official property documentation. "This has to be some mistake. Sarah can't afford to buy real estate." "Why not?" I asked mildly. "Because I don't drive a BMW or wear expensive suits?" Jennifer leaned forward with growing concern. "But Marcus already signed contracts with the renovation company. They're starting the kitchen demolition Monday morning." Then Marcus signed contracts to renovate someone else's property without permission, I said calmly. That's called vandalism. There's no confusion, I interrupted, taking my phone back. 3 years ago, when this family assumed I was broke and unemployed, I purchased that house with cash from my technology company's profits. Dad's face was cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning horror. But you never said you owned a company. You said you worked in tech. I said I founded a tech company, I corrected. You heard worked in tech, and assumed I had some entry-level programming job. My phone rang with perfect timing. I answered on speaker. Morrison Tech Holdings, Sarah speaking. Ms. Morrison, this is Janet Williams from Apex Title Company. We received some unusual inquiries about your property at 1247 Maple Street that require immediate attention. The entire Thanksgiving table was now listening with obvious fascination and growing alarm. What kind of inquiries? I asked. Someone claiming to be the property owner contacted 3 renovation companies about major structural changes. We're required to verify authorization for any modifications to properties in our database. Dad had gone completely pale. Marcus was frantically scrolling through his phone, probably trying to figure out how to cancel contractor agreements. Ms. Morrison, Janet continued professionally, our records show you purchased this property outright in December 2021 for $175,000 cash. There are no liens, no co-owners, and no authorization on file for any third-party modifications. That's correct, I confirmed. I did not authorize any renovations or structural changes. In that case, we'll need to flag this as potential property fraud and notify the appropriate authorities. Unauthorized modification of someone else's property can result in criminal charges. Marcus dropped his phone, the color draining from his face. Jennifer grabbed his arm for support. Furthermore, Janet continued, we show that Morrison Tech Holdings has expanded significantly since the initial property purchase. Your company now owns 4 additional properties in the metro area. That's correct, I replied. We've been quite successful in the commercial real estate market. Dad was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. For additional properties? Commercial office buildings, actually, I explained. Morrison Tech Holdings develops software for property management companies. We own our facilities rather than rent. Aunt Patricia was Googling frantically on her phone. Sarah, Morrison Tech Holdings. This says your company is worth $12.8 million. Sarah's listed as founder and CEO. The Thanksgiving dinner had officially transformed into a business revelation that no one was prepared for. Ms. Morrison, Janet's voice continued through the speaker, should we proceed with filing fraud charges against the individuals who attempted to authorize unauthorized property modifications? Every eye at the dinner table focused on me as I considered my response. Marcus looked like he might be physically ill. Janet, I said carefully, before I decide about fraud charges, could you clarify exactly what unauthorized modifications were planned? Certainly. According to the contractor inquiries, someone authorized complete kitchen demolition, bathroom renovation, and removal of 2 load-bearing walls. The estimated cost was $85,000, scheduled to begin Monday morning. Marcus made a choking sound. He'd planned to spend $85,000 renovating a house he didn't own. Ms. Morrison, Janet continued, I should mention that our automated monitoring system flagged this case because of your company's commercial real estate portfolio. Attempted fraud against property management company executives triggers enhanced investigation protocols. Dad was gripping his wine glass tightly. Sarah, honey, surely this is all a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said firmly. You planned to give away my house and Marcus planned to destroy my kitchen. The only question is whether this rises to the level of criminal fraud. Actually, I continued, there's more to this situation that everyone should understand. I pulled out a folder from my purse. Janet, while I have you on the line, could you verify the other properties owned by Morrison Tech Holdings? Of course. You own the Maple Street residence, plus 4 commercial properties. The Morrison Tech building on 5th Avenue, the Heritage Office Complex on State Street, the Downtown Technology Center on Main Street, and the Riverside Corporate Campus. With each property name, more family members recognized buildings they'd seen around the city. Uncle Robert's accounting firm rented space in the Heritage Office Complex. Wait, Uncle Robert gasped. Sarah, you own my office building? I own several office buildings, I confirmed. Morrison Tech Holdings has become one of the largest commercial property management companies in the region. Marcus was Googling desperately on his phone. The Riverside corporate campus. That's that huge new development. That's worth millions. $47 million, I finished. We broke ground last year. The Thanksgiving revelation was getting more spectacular by the minute. Family members who'd been pitying my failed startup for years suddenly realized they'd been sitting with a multi-millionaire property mogul. But why didn't you tell us? Mom asked weakly. I tried, I replied. Every family gathering for 5 years I've mentioned my company's growth, our property acquisitions, our expansion plans. You've responded with suggestions that I find stable employment. Every time I mentioned property acquisitions or commercial development, you assumed I meant I was looking for a new apartment. Janet's voice returned through the speaker. Ms. Morrison, given the scale of your commercial holdings, attempted unauthorized renovation constitutes felony fraud. We'd like to pursue full prosecution. Dad's successful Thanksgiving dinner was rapidly becoming a criminal investigation. The remainder of Thanksgiving dinner was consumed in awkward silence as relatives processed the revelation that their unsuccessful family member was actually a real estate mogul. Marcus spent the evening frantically calling contractors to cancel renovation projects he couldn't legally authorize. Sarah, Dad said quietly as dishes were cleared, I owe you an enormous apology. We had no idea about your success. You had no idea because you decided I was unsuccessful 5 years ago and stopped listening, I replied. Monday morning, Marcus's contractors arrived at my house to find a no trespassing sign and a security camera system I'd installed over the weekend. The renovation that was supposed to fund his real estate career instead nearly ended it when the state licensing board investigated his attempt to modify property without owner consent. The local business journal ran a feature story about Morrison Tech Holdings and its young founder who'd built a commercial real estate empire while family members assumed she was unemployed. Marcus eventually rebuilt his career, though he learned to verify property ownership before making any modification plans. He also stopped offering career advice to family members whose actual achievements he'd never bothered to understand. The house at 1247 Maple Street remained exactly as I'd designed it. A comfortable home that reflected success through substance rather than flash. No family Thanksgiving dinner would ever threaten its ownership again. Dad learned to ask about my business developments rather than assume them, discovering that his unsuccessful daughter had created more jobs and generated more economic impact than anyone else in the family. The title company used our case in their training materials about property fraud prevention. The Morrison Tech building on 5th Avenue displayed a plaque, built by Morrison Tech Holdings, proving that success doesn't always announce itself.